For thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God. Thou wilt not despise do good. In thy good pleasure unto Zion build thou the walls of Jerusalem. Then shalt thou be pleased with the sacrifices of righteousness, burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then shall they offer bullocks upon thine altar.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in the book. We're continuing today in the Psalms. Wrong microphone input. Okay, Psalm 45. And you may notice we're missing the first thing. We're not missing it really, but as I've explained in part 88 to the chief musician, sons of Korah. I'm not sure about the push. Now I'm confused. I'm like, okay, Mr. Bullinger, is that a subscript? I forgot that whole aspect of it. Is it to the chief musician upon Shoshanim, or is it upon Shoshanim for the sons of Korah, Mashkil? So must find Psalm 42, 44, 45. Okay. That's the point I missed about Psalm 44. It's something about the lilies. I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valley. And of course, some people are going to be nuts about that. But again, in part 88, I explain why that should be like that. Whatever. For the sons, another psalm for the sons of Korah, Maskil. Instruction. Okay? Instruction. And whatever. Most of those extra things are not going to add significantly to our understanding. It probably has some sort of musical notation. You know, it's actually a musical term quite often. It says lilies. I mean, but like when I play my guitar, I often use where is it? Oh, it's over there. It's way up high. I can't get to it. Anyways, I use this little clamp that I clamp on my guitar. It's this little device, and it's made of metal. I mean, it's a very unassuming little thing. But you look at it, if you didn't know what it was, you wouldn't know what it was. You know what I mean? If you don't know what it is, you wouldn't guess necessarily. Unless you saw it sitting next to a guitar, you might guess what it's for. And it's called the capo. Now that means, in Italian, that means the boss. You know what I mean? So it means the boss. And it's because it governs you can change your key, so it's by putting on a certain fret, right? I don't want to go into a guitar lesson. C-A-P-O. Capo. Also, you see in mob movies, they'll call the boss the capo. And so, the word boss and that little device, like if you put those things right next to each other, you'd be like, huh? And so lilies, it might refer to a musical intonation or something. Oh, play that on the lilies. I mean, just because sometimes, the way slang and stuff gets into music and into the language, sometimes, especially when it comes to things that are very aesthetic, like music, it's very hard. I mean, like, what are the words? What do you call that thing when the song is like that? And it's like, you may have do come up, like we call some kinds of music metal and rock. There's rock music and metal music. And apparently there's lily music. See? Because I could say circus music, now that's descriptive. I could say church music, that's descriptive. But lilies, rock, metal, it's not obvious the connective tissue. See what I'm saying? What connects those things together is not, it's like why that music particularly is rock or, why, I mean, it makes sense to us culturally, but how would it sound to someone 1,000 years ago? We explained that this is rock music. They'd expect it would be music made with rocks. That's exactly what they would think. Okay, so who knows what these lilies are? A song of loves. My heart is inditing in a good matter. I'm worried that's not how you spell indictment in English usually. So we're gonna have to look into that one. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. Thou art fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Therefore God hath blessed thee forever. Gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty. And in thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth and meekness and righteousness. And thy right hand shall teach thee terrible things. Thine arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies, whereby the people fall under thee. I gotta remember that's not functioning. Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter. That should sound familiar. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Therefore God, thy God, hath anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. All thy garments smell of myrrh and aloes and cassia, out of the ivory palaces whereby they have made thee glad. King's daughters were among thy honorable women. Upon thy right hand did stand the queen in gold of Ophir. Hearken, O daughter, and consider, and incline thine ear. Forget also, so shall the king greatly desire thy beauty, for he is thy Lord. Worship thou him. And the daughter of Tyre shall be there with a gift. Even the rich among the people shall entreat thy favor. The king's daughter is all glorious within. Her clothing is of wrought gold. She shall be brought unto the king in raiment of needlework. The virgins, her companions, that follow her, shall be brought unto thee. With gladness and rejoicing shall they be brought. They shall enter into the king's palace. Instead of thy fathers shall be thy children, whom thou I'm just because I was like, did I read that right? Because of thy fathers shall be thy children, whom thou mayest make. Oh, this mouse is really bugging me. All right, wait, where? Okay. Okay. I know where I'm at. Oh, at the last verse. Okay. I will anoint thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. And so the thing is, like, God hates. That's not going to be the subject of this study because it's a song of loves. But it's funny because that was the name of the working name of an album. My next album for Oracles of God before the pandemic hit. And truth be told, it wasn't exactly flying along at the time. But it was called I Love, Therefore I Hate. Because if you love righteousness, you must hate wickedness. You cannot properly, like, if you cannot feel true love for what is right, if you have like a and then your attitude towards wickedness will be like that. Whereas, the more you love right, the more you hate wrong. It's, and that it's a danger too because of judgmentalism. You gotta be careful about that. But it's my love. The more I love my wife, the more I hate anyone that would hurt her. You know what I mean? The tighter you cling, the more, the more breaking it is when it's torn from you. Love and hate are very closely tied. They're the opposite ends of emotions. You know what I mean? Love and hate. Happiness, sadness. Humility and pride. Though those are actually, humility and pride aren't emotions. They're like, whatever. Mentalities, I suppose. State of mind. Mentality, state of mind. Aren't those the same thing? Yeah, I think so. or similar enough to dispose with any debate. So, it is a song of love. And obviously, it's talking about the king and the king in his glory. And obviously, because the central verses are about Christ, we're going to look at that. Hold on a second here. All right. So, we're going to look at it in terms of, because the way when I look at the Old Testament, as a Christian, I'm not trying to teach us how did the Jews understand this. That's fine. Sometimes that's useful because it is good to know what was thought of it. I mean, because sometimes, like in the first century when Jesus appeared, certain passages like Isaiah 53, right, are now known to have been considered by the Jews of Jesus' day to have been messianic. Whereas later on, the messianic nature of those passages has been downplayed. Like, meaning that before Jesus, they'd say, Isaiah 53, this is speaking of Messiah. And now they say, Isaiah 53, this is speaking of, but as blindness has happened in Israel, we're not going to really fret too much about their disagreements with us, but just move forward understanding things in a Christian way. So a song of loves. The greatest love of all in the New Testament story is the love of Christ for his bride. Christ for the church. He laid his life down for it. And that church is the bride. It is Jew and Gentile in one body. It is the inheritance of Israel ultimately. But to bring in the purpose of the Jews is to be a light to the Gentiles. And through Christ is how that is accomplished. But it is theirs to inherit because it was their promise initially. And they have, just like I, as someone who was born a Christian, have a special kind of privilege to be introduced to the gospel from my nativity. So I can't remember. I never came to faith. It was implanted in me as a boy. Now, I almost lost it along the way on a few occasions, but God decided to water it and make it grow, for which I am thankful. So, we're going to look at, that's what we're talking about, is Christ and his ultimate, the woman represents that ultimate body of people who ascend to God in resurrection and become his people. I will be their people. They will be my people, and I will be their God. They are ultimately the perfect people of God. That ultimate marriage of God to them, being, like as it was always in the Old Testament, like to be in the midst of them, to be in their midst. And the thing is, when you gather together with brethren, you see the Lord come into the midst of it more. God is always present when we are together. He can be present when we're not together, but when we're together, he is especially present. And the more of us that are together that are truly not just there in his name, like not just there presumptively in his name, meaning we're not because to me, in his name means so much. If I'm in God's name, doing anything in God's name, it's like someone taking this checkbook and writing a check in my name. I mean, that's the kind of power. That's what you're representing. Like, I am doing things in the name of Jesus. When we say in the name of Jesus, it's like by what authority take you up the name of the God of the universe to your lips to speak that you do stuff by his authority? Right? It's a bold claim. That's all I'm saying. Hold on a second. All right. Well, that's why I cannot highlight later on. I need to stick here because if I want to talk about this, we got to be here. Okay. So, all right, that's the body of Christ. I just wanted to kind of go into that a bit. We don't need to wax horribly eloquent about it. You get it. In general, there's plenty to be said about that relationship and all that. And this is like a focused look at it. So we're going to be talking about that. So let's look at the verses and then let's let that lead our thoughts. Okay. So my heart is indicting in a good matter. Well, what's that indicting all about, huh? What is this indicting in a good matter? Indicting, you're usually there's like a C and a T in there, I thought, or something, right? Indictment. That's how we usually spell. Like when you see indictment, you read it somewhere, indictment, right? And you were like, oh, indictment. I went to the building with the big facade to see the guy get an indictment. Because facade, again, another word that's pronounced weirdly as it's written, an indictment. But this is phonetically, it looks like indict. I'm not sure what to think of that, so I have to look that up in Hebrew. As far as English, I don't even know. I'm not gonna go on that kind of a journey at the moment. But let's just see what the Hebrew word is, because maybe indicting. Okay, that word does not mean what I think it means then, right? In English, then I do want to know what it means in English. Indicting. It is apparently what you see on your screen, right? Right? Indict. I'm just like looking. I'm just like, never mind that stuff. Gerund. To means to write or compose. Indict. So okay, it's an archaic verb. So it is. Is that at all related to the indict? Like, does it mean to like write? Whatever. No wonder we got rid of indicting. It sounds just like that word indict. But everyone else seems to think it means overflows. It's only used once in the Bible. That's the problem. It's one of these words where like, what's this mean? It means to stir. Okay, in Hebrew. Move. For some reason, the King James, now I'll tell you why, because scholarship has just gotten better. It's probably more right to say overflows. Instead of my heart is indicting. I don't know. Maybe that could be, maybe that's the Vulgate being reflected there. Sometimes the King James translators look to the Vulgate for sort of guidance on their translating, the Latin Vulgate, which is the Latin translation of the Hebrew and Greek Bibles. I'm not sure if it's a translation of the Greek. It might be a translation of the Septuagint, for all I know. So I don't know the history of the Vulgate. I'm not a Bible historian. I just have my toes dipped in everything, so I know a bit about it. So that's a subject you can always really explore. The history of the Bible is a fascinating subject. There's even a museum for that. Isn't there a museum of the Bible history or something like that? I mean, just absolutely interesting. So my heart is overflowing in something good. I am filled up. That's when your heart is filled to overflowing. I mean, it's like the goodness. I don't know what to do with it all. I've had moments like that where you're having such a good time that it's like you're so full. It's almost like you could take the excess good feelings. You wish you could store them away for another time. Right? I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. I see what they said my heart is writing. My heart is, it doesn't, linguistically, it doesn't make sense, but inspired, maybe is the word. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. I like that. Whatever. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. All right. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. So I will speak of the things which I have made touching the king. I think when he says the things which I have made touching meaning the things, the lyrics, I think is what he's talking about. My heart is overflowing. I want to talk about the things that I have made touching the king. I have made things concerning the king. What have I made? Well, this praise, these words. That's what I think it's referring to. Okay, and so we'll just keep going. We don't need to dwell on that part because it's just by way of introduction. It's just a flourish of words. This is Psalms. It's not not every single ounce of word is going to have the same big impact. Thou art fairer than the children of men. This is of Christ. This is what, and here's the thing. The song for the sons of Korah, A Song of Love, speaking to the true king. Now, interesting, Korah was the one who tried to take the place of Moses, the true leader. And Christ, the true king, was the stone which the builders rejected. You know what I mean? But he was made the head of the corner. This ideal king. Well, I guess I wanted to draw your attention to those points. If it occurs to me again how that applied on. Thou art fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Because it's the idealized. From the perspective of the writer, what is he thinking? Does he know he's talking about Christ the Messiah? Does he know precisely? Well, he's talking about the king. And according to Hebrews, this whole thing, referring to someone as God and then talking about God towards them. This is the God king. He is imagining the idealized king. Because, the ultimate king of Israel was always supposed to be God. Right? And when the people of Israel demanded a king, God gave them Saul. Right? And they looked at Saul and said, Saul, what a man. He looks like a king. Oh, to be desired. Tall and strong and, had a voice like a king. It doesn't say that precisely, but you know what I'm saying? He just looked the part. Everyone, that's the kind of man we need for a king. Saul. They looked at him and they like, yeah, all right, that's a king, all right. All right. And God from the beginning said, I was their king. They've rejected me. This is what the king's going to do. He's going to do this and that. He's going to take of your sons. He's going to make them soldier. He's going to take taxes from you. He's going to do all these things that are going to be, he's going to take your daughters for concubines, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be, and it's not going to be good. But man has always wanted a king to stand before them. They didn't like that God was their leader, but he was invisible. He was like this idealized king who was not there. And the children of Israel didn't like having a king, not having a king, just being under God. They were annoyed with it. And they were like, hey, Samuel, tell the Lord, when he calls this king God, he is envisioning, what would it be like if God was a king? What would it be like if God was if he is ultimately our king, but what if he was manifest on earth as a man? And that's how I'm looking at this. This is God, because that's what Christ is. He is the king manifest on earth. He is God the king manifest on earth as a man. And so then this is the words that he has, his heart has, he's like, what if God is our king? And what if he was here to be king? What would the kingdom, how should I praise him in his glory? You are fairer than the children of men. Normal humans, you're better than that. There's something more. Grace is poured into your lips. Because that which cometh out of a man is what defiles him, not which goeth into him, Out of the mouth proceeds, out of the heart. But often the heart and the lips, like as James said, the lips, the tongue is a fire. It is set on fire of hell. And can be bridled by no man, but grace is poured into his lips. Christ said, I come and I speak only those things which God has given me to speak. And he had word, not only that, but the character and nature of the things he spoke were gracious words. Now there's also words of judgment, but also words of forgiveness and of reconciliation. Therefore God hath blessed thee forever. You are fairer than men, than the children of men, the normal humans. You're above the station. It's still looking at him as a man, because Christ was a man. So even though it says fairer than the children of men, it is somewhat suggestive. It is not explicit. You would use that of other men too. You are fairer than the children of men. You're fairer. There's something better about you than is normal. This is not normal. You're so much better. And I look at as far as how beautiful are the feet of him that preach the gospel. There is a beauty in who someone is when you know someone. It doesn't matter how ugly their face is in the conventional sense, you know what I mean? But in the sense of like that you recognize that face and the importance of that personage to you or whatever, to the world. There's a beauty that goes beyond the outward. Everyone knows this. That some people are beautiful without being beautiful, and some people are very beautiful and somehow at the same time extremely ugly. If you follow my meaning. They're outwardly beautiful but inwardly ugly, and it renders them all ugly. I mean, like their whole aspect, it ruins. At least to people who recognize that ugliness. Sometimes people are blind to it, and all they see is the outward, right? You have to be, because to see Christ as he is, he has no figure, nor, in Isaiah 53, it says he has no form, no comeliness, no, that we should desire him. Here it says he's fair, because he is fairer than the children of men, but also it's a vision of him in his glory. You know what I mean? Because of the, gird thy sword upon thy thigh, O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty, though most mighty king. The psalmist elevates this king onto the same level with God throughout this. The king is on par with God because it's a vision of God as their king. What if God was a king among men, like a man? What if he took human form and dwelt among us? What kind of king would he be? O most mighty, with thy glory and thy majesty. He will ride forth with his sword. And he came humbly, just and having salvation, and lowly, and riding upon an ass, as is fit. But he will return in wrath, with his sword bare, and the lighting down of his glorious arm. And in thy majesty ride prosperously, because of truth and meekness and righteousness, and thy right hand shall teach thee terrible things. True that. In thy majesty ride prosperously. Well, what you do, what you set out to accomplish, that it should be done. I mean, prosperous. Meekness, gently, sure. Oh, one second. Profit, as far as we think of prosperous. But prosper, I mean to spur on, is that where it comes from? Probably not. Sparrows. Prosperous. It's probably from Latin. Salak. To rush. I see. So it means kind of to move forward, basically is the idea. You can get forward, right? And not go back. To prosper is to truly go forward and not backwards, Ride forward. In fact, they had translated. The reason I was like, at first I was saying oop, because when I looked here and it said prosperous, like when I did the good old hover definition, which you can't see, but if you've ever been here, you've observed it. It says out. So they wanted to say ride out. Whatever, ride out prosperously. Fine. I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written, the number he knew. But what about this meekness thing? Well, he is gentle. The Lord is gentle. That implies, meekness. Meekness and gentility. His idea, it's not the idea of weakness. God is not weak. And God's king is not weak, but he is restrained. He uses restraint. He's not some wild force of nature like a hurricane coming through, swinging his sword and just like a lawnmower, just cutting down every single blade of grass. That is not the Lord. He is controlled. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, but it shall not come near you. The gentleness of the Lord is seen in things like the Passover, when the death angel goes forth. And notice, he only kills those whom the Lord had wanted to be killed. Self-control. That's why in the midst of talking about the sword, it would also talk about meekness. Because the sword requires us to be meek. At least if in the Lord. You can't be some wild, uncontrolled force of death and destruction and be part of God's kingdom. You know, meekness is absolutely required. You have to get mad. You know what I mean? I always remember when I was a kid, we had these, Tales of the Old West, Wild West books. It was Time Life, the Old West, right? It's like, and once he shot a man for snoring. That's all I remember. Billy the Kid, who was it? He shot a man for snoring too loud. Somebody was snoring too loud, so he shot him. Insulted, sir. I demand satisfaction. Psh. And then you go outside and you shoot each other. Well, I guess hopefully you're both so drunk you miss. I don't know. Stupid. Because I can't imagine that stuff ever happened without a significant contribution from alcohol. I mean, really? Or the lack thereof, perhaps. Depending on the person. Some people, it's like, my God, there's no beer. John is going to be, out of his mind with rage. Sorry. Oh, hold on one second. Let me Okay, we must continue here. Oh, let's see. Right, meekness. Truth and meekness and righteousness. I was saying before about loving righteousness, loving truth. It's very easy to end up like the Pharisees and like in a crowd of people getting ready to stone someone because of righteousness and truth. Hey, it's the truth. That's a sin. That's wrong. That's particularly wrong. I could never do something like that. Where's the stones? Let's cast stone. Let's kill them. Let's execute sentence because that's what's right. That's the truth. Meekness is the restraint. But I think that's more, not so much in judgment. That would be more mercy. But still. There are many temptations to abuse truth and righteousness to justify our own rage and our own desire for satisfaction and vengeance. God has made it clear, vengeance is mine. He has not given it to us to take vengeance like that. Not of ourselves. Now, of human government, there is a vengeance component, which is what prison and things like death are supposed to represent. But I just have so little faith in our justice system anymore that's why, when the governor of my state ended put a moratorium on the death penalty. At the time, I thought it was a bad idea. But then I started reading about the subject, and I realized, you know what? There is really a problem. And yeah, too many times, too many innocent people, they got to figure it out, Let me hear about it, Because sometimes, because it's right. It is right. If we are murderers, we deserve to lose our lives. Otherwise, I mean, it won't stop murder. But here's the thing. The death penalty and all that stuff doesn't stop people from committing murders. But I think if we had no penalty for murders, there'd be a lot more murder. I mean, there's a certain amount of all things you cannot prevent by penalties and stuff because what if they don't get caught? They have the expectation they might not get caught, right? There's a lot of things, or just passion. Even knowing they're going to get busted, people will sometimes kill because of passion. And you can't do nothing about it as far as you can't change human nature. There are other times where it's like, yeah, you know what? I think the penalty being in place makes people think twice. I mean, if there was nothing, I mean, if there was no, and of course that's ridiculous. But I mean, that's the other side of things. There has to be something. There has to be vengeance. There has to be punitive punishment for things. If you don't, you'll get way too much of that. Because human nature is just such that we are not governable. Men are wicked. If you don't understand the desperate, wicked nature of humankind, that they need some kind of guardrails, at least in their own mind. You know, like just the fear of, there is retribution. It does exist. So I have to think about that a little bit. And right and wrong does exist. I mean, they don't want to teach kids that anymore, but hey. And thy right hand shall, they'll teach you that wrong is right and right is wrong, but they won't teach you right from wrong correctly. You know, they'll teach you that good is evil and evil is good, and that light is darkness and darkness is light. So you'll learn about light and darkness, but you'll not learn properly about light and darkness or good and evil or any of those things, or right and wrong. Thine arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. Thy right hand shall teach thee terrible things. The Lord, blessed be the Lord my rock, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. The right hand is the hand of power that exercises power. I don't know what it means by terrible things. I want to. That may have the sense of like powerful. I want to see what that terrible is. What is the connotation here? Meaning, what is it, or is it denote actual? Is it where is it? There. Shall teach thee. All right, looks like shall teach. What? Right is reverence. Morally to revere. Sure. To frighten. Okay. So it's that fear in the normal sense that we use it. Like fearful things, powerful, intimidating. Because fear is not necessarily like, as I said, there's a fear of the Lord. And I've often described it like when you see a down power line and you see it arcing and stuff. If you've ever been in the presence of that kind of power, and gotten anywhere, you can even get shocked by getting on the ground too close to it. You know what I mean? But if you've ever seen something like that, or been around anything particularly dangerous, large machinery or anything like that, you get a sense of that around you. You get the feeling of like, wow, this is, a big thing, a dangerous thing. There are some fearful truths. And you think about it just through our own exploration, what humans have discovered. You can split the atom and blow up an entire city with one bomb. That is a fearful thing our right hand has discovered. And that is the sort of that is what it's sort of like it's saying about the king here, that when it comes to you will ride out prosperously, gird up your sword. This is to war. You know what I mean? Your right hand is going to teach you some pretty awful truths about warfare. Yahweh, thy right hand has become glorious in battle. Yahweh, thy right hand has dashed in pieces the enemy. And by the greatness of, this from Psalm 30, Deuteronomy 32. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's Exodus 15. Flood stood upright as a wall. So, your arrows are sharp in the hearts of the king and enemy, whereby the people fall out. And this is about the right hand learning, the warfare. In righteousness he doth judge and make war. But he is meek and lowly, and riding on an ass at one point. But he is that same one. He shall go forth and also have victory. Because the meekness is not like this all-encompassing thing that's supposed to be like, oh, you're always meek. It's like meekness is to be used with discretion. It's the ability to put your sword away and to keep it sheathed. To wait and be patient. But at the decisive moment, all who love the truth must strike with truth. and let the end be what it may be. God says this is the end. Now let the truth ring. Let the word of God go forth. And let those that be smitten be smitten. And let those that be raised be raised. You know what I mean? He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. That's it. Time's up. Let there be time no longer. There is a time which is, that's it. Game over. You know, hey, you were playing around and now you're done. Whereby the people fall under thee. You know, I will trample them in my fury. I will tread them down in my anger, and their blood will be splattered on my garments, saith the Lord. Thy throne, O God. This is in Hebrews in the New Testament. That's what tells us. This is about Jesus. But thy throne, O God, thy throne, King, O God, is forever and ever. The throne of David is the throne of God, because God giveth it. And it was rightfully his throne. He was their king. And so ultimately God's son would take the throne. But God's son was also David's son, because he was also a man. At least by law. I mean, I've often wondered, when Christ was conceived, is it enough for him to have been born of her? Was he wholly, was his whole zygote directly from God, as opposed to just the egg becoming, you know what I mean, was it a full, you know what I mean, was it a full implantation of an embryo, or was literally Mary the donor of his DNA? You know, half of it, you know, which is interesting. You know, and I would tend to think that is probably the case. Or that if it was the other way, like the pandemic, 1% of people end up, you know, less than 1% of people end up in the hospital, and they talk about it like it's the end of the world. Because we don't have enough hospital space. That's what it is. They've been, you know, reducing the number of hospital beds for years. Because it doesn't make sense for profit hospitals to have surge capacity. And it doesn't make a lot of sense not to have for-profit hospitals, to tell you the truth. Because the last thing you want to do is take the profit motive out of things. It always gets you garbage, to tell you the truth. It always sounds good. Like, well, just let the government run everything. It's like, but the government runs everything terribly. They have no motive to please customers, because the customers got no place else to go. You got to come here whether you like. It's like, you want to go to the hospital like you go to the DMV? You have the same experience at the hospital you got at the DMV? That's what you get with your government-run health care. I get the government insurance aspect and all that, but the government, you don't want the government running the healthcare system. Bad idea. You want competitiveness. It makes sense that the government would be the least competitive. I mean, that's why nobody likes it, because they don't pay enough. So there you go. Man, I can't make it 15 minutes. 1 second. Okay. Sorry. That's it. The other alternative, God is everlasting. He is from everlasting to everlasting. His throne, the scepter of his kingdom, is a right scepter. A scepter of righteousness is what it says in Hebrews. You know, the scepter is that which represents the king's power and authority. You know, he holds it in his right hand that learns those terrible lessons of death and destruction. The lessons of war. The secrets of war. You know, terrible truths. Like, yeah, so if I swing it parts your head from its body. 1 second. And so on. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. It's hard to do one without the other. I don't see, you know, like, I just absolutely love good things. But I don't feel bad things, you know, hey, I really love children. But I'm kind of, you know, but child rape, hey, who cares? You know, it's no big deal. I mean, really? You know, that's why that doesn't make sense, right? The more you love children, the more you care about their welfare, You're going to hate any sort of wickedness to do with that. So love and hate, you know what I mean? Also, the people you love often engender the strongest emotions. Meaning, nobody makes you more angry than your spouse. That's like for real married life, always. Well, not really, actually. The government made me angrier than my spouse. And my spouse doesn't make me that angry. But what I'm saying is not that she makes me that angry. That's not right at all. But that she could make me really angry. She doesn't. You know, I've spent a lot of time working it out, so I have a little bit of experience in the thing. You know, and some people are more suited for each other than others. It can be difficult. Sometimes I wonder, you know, it's just like with the resisting the pandemic. People say, oh, I resist the pandemic because it's easy for me. I get along with my wife because it's easy for me. I'm not sure that it's that easy if it's not if you're not well matched, and it can be very difficult. But even so, you know, I don't count myself. You know, I say I almost lost my faith. I've never almost lost my marriage. You know what I mean? I've never been even close. So it's like, yeah, that is a lot more easy to do for me. But I know it's difficult, and I know why. It's not like I've never had times where I've either, you know, been hurt or hurted someone I love. And so I understand that. But it gets, the more you love them, the more potential there is. And especially if you're not loving, and it ought not so to be, you know, as Christians, it's something we must strive to live up to. Is that, you know, husbands, love your wives. Wives, obey your husbands. And you should love them too, obviously. But the reason they say it like that is because husbands have trouble with the love thing and wives have trouble with the obedience thing. They do. Occasionally. Not my wife, though. So you know. Anyways, not really. You know, it's like, but who doesn't? Who doesn't have a problem? I have a problem with the obedience thing. Okay, just so you know. Sometimes. I wish I didn't. And it's not, you know, of course, not just with the Lord. I mean, you know, sometimes it's good to be a bit like reluctant to obey. Depends on who's talking. And it depends on what they're saying. I don't know. I confess, I don't know if I'm as righteous as Abraham. I don't know if I heard a voice telling me to sacrifice my children, I would probably think I shouldn't listen to it. You know, and I don't mean to be flippant towards Abraham, but I see that argument from people, and I understand. I get the feeling, but it's like, yeah, that takes a lot of faith. It's interesting that God would praise that. I'm like, but on the other hand, our spouses when they're right, and you know, and our children when they're right. But what about when they're wicked? Well, we don't want to hate. We have to learn to see that. That's the thing. We have to learn to sometimes separate the person from those things, with a hope of separating them literally from those things. I mean, I look at someone in my life, if they've transgressed against me, I don't want to define them by their transgression, not in Christ. I want to look at them as redeemed, as forgiven, and I want to have a gracious attitude towards them, realizing that I myself, you know, often fall after the same pattern of foolishness. You know, we all desire mercy, you know, and want to receive it, and generally are inclined to give it. But there is a end where patience gives out. You know, the Lord is long suffering, but he's not ever suffering. You know, he's patient, but he's not going to not fulfill his word. You know what I mean? It is necessary to love righteousness and hate wickedness, but we need to do it with meekness and humility towards the people who we might feel our hearts righteously inflamed. It has to be tempered with a bit of, a bit of control. Now, you know, like I say, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God, and they're spiritual, and it's words and stuff. You know, like that I can speak and God can change someone's mind. That's a mighty weapon. you know. The fact that I could not even be particularly good at it. I could be pretty bad at it and do a pretty bad job of it, but yet still God could take with what I did and make something better out of it. I always believe that God can take what we did and make it better. Just like when a seed is planted and it gets watered and it grows into something bigger and more like what we were trying to get at. You know, we want to see someone sprout back. I believe the same things. He has anointed thee with, because of this, because of the righteousness. He's a righteous king. But notice again, thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of thy kingdom is a right scepter. Thou, O God, hast loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, thy God, the God of God, because he is envisioning God as an earthly king. And then he's imagining there'd still be God otherwise, because you can't limit God to an earthly, no more than God can be placed in a temple made with hands. And he cannot be confined there. So he cannot be confined to a man, to a manifestation as a man. That can't be the totality of God. And so God would still have God. And therefore God, thy God, O God, hath anointed thee with oil, the oil of gladness above thy fellows. So yeah, it is a very, this is a very strong Old Testament, New Testament passage to look at when you're thinking about things like nature of God. How do we explain something like the Trinity? How do people come up with the idea? Why did people coin this word? You know what I mean? Because obviously the Trinity doesn't exist outside of theology. God is whatever he is. We came up with a word to describe God and a bunch of qualities he has, and that is a Trinity, and God is a Trinity according to our way of speaking. At least from all the scriptural evidence I could say. I apologize to those I've offended in speaking this, which is what I believe to be the truth. But God is a Trinity. Even if, for a long time I opposed it just on the basis on principle, that it's wrong. Like, I don't like the idea of the Council of Nicaea per se, but it's there. How can I guess on some level I'm like, as I go older, I'm like, okay, fine. That was a long time ago. I'm interested in hearing what they had to say at the council, but it's not governing me now. I don't believe in the Trinity because the Council of Nicaea said so. It's because I read what they said, and I was like, oh, okay, I believe that too. And I think it agrees with the scriptures. Now, their weird wording was necessary because we don't have language to properly express this relationship of God to himself. And so we coined words, and we said, well, we're going to talk about persons with a special idea of what, like they have in the dictionary, you have a definition. It says definition 1, definition 2, definition 3. It's like, they're like definition 4, persons in the Trinitarian sense, because it is a different definition of the word persons. They actually came up with a new definition for the word. A very specific Trinitarian meaning to the word. And because we often think of a person as indistinguishable from like a, what do we call it? Well, an individual, right? A single, it's such a weird, I don't even like using the wrong words because I don't know exactly how to describe the nature of God. And I have several things, I'm just trying to avoid going into a long discussion on the Trinity because we're done with this study anyways. But I have a study out of my website, oraclesofgod.org. Under the doctrine page, you can find a couple things there on the Trinity. Just as my, path has gone, Trinitarians, they just have no idea what it means or how to explain it. And it's not easy to explain. And I haven't even attempted here, so don't, I haven't even, I've just asserted it here. I haven't tried to explain it or justify it, other than the justification that comes from this passage. Now, all thy garments. I was going to begin at verse 9, but we'll just begin at verse 8. It's fine. We'll pick it up at verse 8 tomorrow, and hopefully we'll just round out this chapter. It's only a total of like 9 more verses, so that should be good. I thought we'd pick it up from, because we'll talk more about the daughter. We didn't get to the daughters, which is good because we can talk all about the daughter, the woman, and all that tomorrow, because there's going to be a lot to untangle there, I think. Well, not untangle, but like, I don't know. I feel like from just reading it, I get the general impression. But just to make sure, we're going to look at it in detail, and hopefully we'll garner some benefits. So thank you for joining me today. Look forward to be back again tomorrow. Until then.
For thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God. Thou wilt not despise do good. In thy good pleasure, unteased with the sacrifices of righteousness, burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings.